Welcome back to the Great American Movie Review, where we review great American movies.
My name is Mikiah.
And my name is Kyle. This is a movie of the week style podcast. We take turns picking films and we talk about it. We talk about their context and quality. This week I have selected the 2002 superhero sequel to Blade, Blade 2. Blade 2 is a bit of a Matrix esque vampire comic book movie. Definitely a lot of the late 90s, early 2000s feel to it. It was directed by Guillermo Del Toro, taking uh, the directorsmanship from Stephen Norrington, who at the time was making League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, a movie that ruined several careers.
Yeah.
But Blade, yeah, Blade 2, as I said before, is the sequel to the 1998 R-rated action comic book movie. Wesley Snipes is the titular Blade. The first film was a huge financial success given where comic book movies were at the time, led to the second installment and the franchise having Blade Trinity as well. All three of which made money comparatively. So
It's debatable for Trinity, but it wasn't like a
yeah,
flop.
it's definitely a decline. But I wouldn't call it a bomb.
No, definitely not. It probably broke even, but not
I
enough
think
to.
it
Yeah.
did break even, but yeah,
Yeah, they weren't talking about a Blade 4, you know.
no one was talking about a Blade 4 because of the critical failure of Blade Trinity.
Right.
But Blade 2 was a $54 million budget and raked in 155 million. So I saw this movie. It came out in 2002. I saw this movie probably when I was like 10 or 11 the first time I
Oh,
saw it.
okay.
So I have a great nostalgic feel for this
I
movie.
saw it. I watched all three Blade movies like 4 or 5 years ago, and that was the
Mhm.
last time. That was the first and only time that I've seen any of them. So I rewatched the first one, and then I watched Blade 2 as well. Why'd you pick
Yep.
Blade 2 over Blade 1? Just curious.
I picked Blade 2 over Blade 1 because Guillermo Del Toro. The only things that I would speak of for Stephen Norrington, it's a fine movie, Blade 1. Um, but yeah, there's not really much to say for him as a director outside of that, and also Stephen S. Goyer. I wanted to see a sequel,
Yeah,
or us cover a sequel for the first time because of it. It's interesting to put this through our scoring system to see how things would change with a sequel. Also, it's a little bit more of horror esque than the first one, I'd argue.
I would definitely say so. I actually like Blade 2 quite a bit more than the first Blade
I
personally.
do too.
So I'm happy talking about Blade 2.
Blade 1 is consensus number 1 when it comes to the Blade trilogy. Um, but I really like this
Oh yeah,
movie.
Blade 1 is kind of strangely ahead of its time, and by ahead of its time I mean by like 2
A
years.
year before The Matrix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it came out before The Matrix, even though it feels like it's a movie that came out after The Matrix in terms of its aesthetics and
And The Matrix is known
everything.
as being like the pioneer for the modern,
Yeah, action
like
film kind of.
like technologically
Mhm.
dystopian gothic movie.
Yeah,
So
for sure. And so Blade 2 definitely has more of that flavor in it than Blade 1
yeah,
does.
it definitely feels very Matrix Reloaded at times, and that's
Yeah.
not just the crappy visual effects in the fight
Yeah.
scenes.
But I think it's interesting because I watched a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, and Guillermo del Toro talked about how he didn't want to try to make it just like The Matrix, but he had similar influences as The Matrix.
Hmm.
Like he had a lot of anime influence, which is directly what The Matrix was. And maybe the studio is
Yep.
more likely to sign off on something like that when you have The Matrix out, you know? Even if he wasn't trying to make a Matrix like action movie, I think his influences and the fact that The Matrix was what it was and allowed for like this kind of thing to become more popularized is still kind of influenced this movie being able to be the way that it is. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's an interesting kind of one to look at. I like Blade 2 a lot. It has I'm a sucker for just
It's a
vampire.
guilty pleasure for me.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for vampire stuff, especially like late 90s, early 2000s vampire stuff. I was a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. Like, I love that
Oh
show.
yeah.
And I mean, that show kind of,
Well, that show's just a good
it
show.
is.
So
And it kind of blended the whole, I think, what it kind of almost it was almost a pioneer in like the kind of the cool vampire thing that was very popular at the time, while still blending in the kind of Anne Rice style vampire, the Interview with the Vampire, romanticized vampire.
Sure.
It kind of blends those two, and it's kind of interesting how it kind of bridges that gap. And this movie definitely has none of the Anne Rice stuff. It's all just the cool vampire stuff.
Yeah. It's purely a comic book version of the Matrix with vampires.
Yes.
It just happens to have
Yeah,
vampires, but
yeah, I dig it though. I dig it.
I think above all else, aside from some very very iconic lines, like mostly from Ron Perlman somehow, but which Ron Perlman is also in this movie. Is this the first time that he and Del Toro
No,
work together?
they actually worked together in Del Toro's very first movie, Kronos, which is a Mexican film.
Kronos, fair enough.
Yeah, it's also a vampire film.
But I knew they had like 4 or 5 different movies together.
Yeah, no, he's
Like
worked
this,
like
the Hellboy movies, and Pacific Rim being a
yeah,
few.
he's not in every one of his movies, but he is in most of his movies.
It's a
'Cause
bit
he
like
was
Helena
in
Bonham Carter with
yeah,
Tim Burton.
yeah, he was in Nightmare Alley even
Hmm.
just so recently. That was his.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure he was the voice in his Pinocchio as well. So yeah, no, Ron Perlman is gonna pop up in Guillermo del Toro movies for the most part, even his very first one. So
Yeah, but
yeah,
you can definitely feel the character of Hellboy a little bit.
yeah. I
And
mean,
for some reason.
what happened with this movie was Del Toro was really gunning to make a Hellboy movie, but
Hmm.
his first Hollywood movie that he made, English language Hollywood movie, was Mimic, and
Hmm.
Mimic didn't it. Mimic is fine. Like, I don't think Mimic is great. I think it's an interesting concept, but it's a little gross and weird. It's a giant cockroach man, which apologies to my wife if she listens to this because she can't even stand that word. But I will like I was
What,
like
cockroach?
never, yeah, don't say it too many times or else she'll
I'll
just shut
say it a
us
few
off.
more times.
But I mean, Del Toro clearly has a fascination with like insects and stuff, and yeah, there's definitely some grossness in that movie, but it didn't make a lot of money financially. It was a bomb for sure, and so he got kind of almost blacklisted from like major Hollywood productions for like a little bit. But apparently David S. Goyer knew Del Toro. They had some sort of working relationship in the past. I don't know exactly what the context for that was, but they knew each other. And so Goyer reached out to Del Toro while they were developing Blade 2 because they were pretty much immediately after Blade 1 started writing the script for Blade 2 because it was a hit. So, yeah, it's just kind of interesting that all of that happened because Del Toro was like, I don't really want to direct a sequel, you know, I kind of want to do my own thing. And Goyer was like, if you want to do Hellboy, then you're going to have to make something like Blade 2 because if Blade 2 is a hit, then you will get Hellboy. And that's exactly what happened. So,
And it's kind of funny because obviously he's directing a sequel, but there probably wasn't much of a notion of him directing another Blade movie because at the time he was directing Hellboy is when Goyer was directing Blade Trinity.
oh
So
yeah. I mean, and at
obviously
the
there was
yeah,
just a like you're gonna direct this movie so that way you can make another movie. That has been brought up a few times in this podcast. Quid pro quo kind of directing, but
I mean, and most of the
um,
time in franchises, I mean, there's exceptions to it where
right,
a single filmmaker has kind of authorship over an entire series, kind of like you get with The Dark Knight or Sam Raimi's Spider-Man to some extent, and then also like Guardians of the Galaxy with James Gunn. Like these kind of things are not that common. Usually, you get directors kind of changing out between sequels.
right, and especially directors who maybe haven't found their footing, like Del Toro, and
Right.
in this instance because it's his fourth movie
Yeah. Which
and
I mean,
only his third one that's English. So
Kronos is a really good foundation for him. I really like Kronos, and if you are into vampire movies, it's a really unique kind of spin on that, more low key, more dramatic. But I still really like that. And then you get, I forget what his, and yeah, at some point, then he made Mimic and The Devil's
Devil's Backbone
Backbone.
was
Yeah,
his third
La
one.
Espinosa del Diablo
Hmm.
came out before this one did. He was working on it. That's part of why I guess it was 4 years between them because they wanted him to do it, but he was really invested in getting The Devil's Backbone made. So, which Devil's Backbone also great.
He is definitely a very niche director. It's a very
Absolutely.
particular style of horror, but I do love his movies.
Oh
So,
yeah.
and I really wish he got to finish the Hobbit trilogy.
Oh, I wish. Yeah, I
Man,
wish
I
you got to
really
work
would
on that.
have. I have no doubt I would have liked that quite a bit.
I
Just
mean, you
a
see some
different
of.
take.
Yeah,
You still I
you see some of his aesthetic influence in the
Yeah,
Hobbit stuff, just from like
especially
concept art
Beorn
and stuff,
the bear man.
and some of like the Spider Forest stuff too. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Just the overall atmosphere feels very. If you took Peter Jackson's image of Middle Earth and then you gave it to Del Toro.
Yeah, I think Del Toro is one of these very singular filmmakers. Not in that he is so stylistically like unique in his actual filmmaking, but more so in he is an eye for design aesthetics, and his influence will come through even in a studio movie like this. Like
Hmm.
you can see the clear differences between the very industrial urban kind of first movie, and then into the second one has a much more gothic feel to it, and his nighttime, like, it has that kind of amber kind of quality, but in the nighttime, and then he keeps the blue in the daytime, and it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition to the first one, which mostly kept cool colors throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, and they just have two completely different feels.
Yeah,
Even if the writing is similar.
yeah, it's kind of, it really feels like the harsh light of day in that kind of situation. Like nobody's really out and about during the day because all of these characters are operating at night, either hunting vampires or being vampires. So,
And it's kind of funny because I saw this before the Hellboy movies, and I obviously wasn't aware at the time that both were Del Toro, but they feel very similar
oh yeah.
in feel, and I love the Hellboy movies, so of course I love this
Well,
movie.
and apparently Del Toro even used like Mike Mignola's like sketches and stuff and some of his drawings as inspiration, which Mike Mignola created the Hellboy comics. He used those as inspiration for some of like the sets and stuff in this film. So
Right.
that also makes sense there.
There's also even more overlap because the guy who plays I already forgotten his the first main bad guy, Nomak,
yeah.
is Prince Nuada
Yes.
from Golden Army. So there's overlap with actors, there's overlap with sketches, there's overlap with obviously director and that kind of thing. So it does feel very like a stepping stone to the
Yeah.
Hellboy franchise.
Yeah, and I really like Del Toro a lot, even though he is a little bit hit or miss. I think
He
that
definitely is.
because like I don't love Pacific Rim as much as a lot of people do. I
No,
still enjoy
absolutely
it.
not.
Um,
it's it's kind
I
of an interesting
yeah
movie, and it is kind of weird. It's not a very good movie, even if it's well made.
yeah, that's always the thing. His movies are always well made.
His movies are always well made.
Like I didn't like his Nightmare Alley very much, especially in comparison to like the original and how little he actually did with it in comparison.
I
Aesthetically,
liked how
it's
it
beautiful.
looked,
Oh
but
yeah.
I didn't really like Crimson Peak that much.
Crimson
So
Peak is another one. I think I still
yeah,
really I could watch Crimson Peak just for the way it looks,
yeah.
but I'm not going to like return to it too much because I still don't love it. Even the first Hellboy, I don't really like the first Hellboy very much. I love Hellboy too, but the first Hellboy to me is just
I
kind
love
of
both of them, but
okay.
I will agree. Del Toro is the master at well made train wrecks. It's so amazing.
Yeah, even when his movies aren't great, I can still watch him because of like
Exactly.
his yeah his
They're very
visual
entertaining.
and aesthetic kind of qualities to them. So yeah, but this is one that does work for me from him. It's
Hmm.
not. I don't think it's one of his very best or anything because his very best I think are great. Like I love
Pan's
Shape of
Labyrinth
Water,
or
Pan's
Shape of
Labyrinth,
Water is good.
Devil's Backbone. Yeah, those are all like excellent movies that I really love. This one I enjoy it quite a bit. I wouldn't quite say I love it, but I do like it quite a bit.
Hmm.
It's a lot of fun.
It is dumb fun in the way that early 2000s action movies and late 90s action
Yeah.
movies kind of were.
Yeah, and I think he had the right sensibility to like not try to make it this thing. It definitely has more melodrama in it than the first Blade, but
Right.
I think that he takes his artistic style and applies it to a more action focused comic book just kind of we're gonna have fun with this kind of
But there's
movie.
still that horror tension somehow, and like I guess it's the scenes immediately following the rave scene, which is also in the first one. So I guess they were just trying to rival the Matrix movies with rave scenes in the first 25 minutes of a movie.
Well, have you watched the show What We Do in the Shadows?
No, I've seen the movie. I didn't watch the
The
show.
show is great. So if you've been resisting the show, it's as good as the movies,
Hmm.
as the movie was. But there's in season 4, she like one of them really trying to like make a vampire club, and they always are referencing Blade because of that. So
I mean, yeah,
she even puts
the
in blood sprinklers.
the Blade movies really make it look like they're just that all the vampires are just like random heroin addicts who just love to party,
Right.
except replace the heroin for blood.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. I actually like at the beginning of this movie, kind of hammering in that imagery. It pulls a Buffy episode 1 style kind of twist moment where the person that you think is the prey is actually the predator in the
Right.
situation. And because you got him coming in and he looks all messed up and
Because yeah, he's
strung
very
out.
meek looking to start
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, he looks strung out, like he's been using like, or he's he's a vampire because clearly this guy's not a human being, but he's getting pulled through this thing.
If the
And
hood is up, it's a vampire.
yeah, he's getting pulled through this thing, and you're like, oh, what's happening to this guy though? Still, anyway, and then the tables turn, and he kills everybody in that room,
Right.
and so it
I
that kind
hate
of
vampires.
yeah, which sets him up infinitely better than I think the villain in the first
In the
movie.
first, yeah, Deacon
Yeah,
Frost, not a very good film.
no,
He's
no,
so weird.
yeah, he's very
Who
2000s, even
knew
as
that
yeah,
sunblock is actually UV resistant completely, and it's not
right.
just SPF means that you can.
Right. It's so funny. Yeah, there's stuff in the first movie that's like this is not great, but it's
They also
fun.
cure
Is what I
vampirism in like 5 minutes. Wow.
yeah, that's
Which
I
I
feel
guess
that's what I
they
feel.
carry over to this movie, and it's like, why don't you just use the cure on all vampires if it can just like cold turkey? You can just go from like pure vampire to back to a human in a night.
Yeah, sequel continuity stuff was kind of poorly handled at the beginning of this movie, which I have
Especially
to
in
chalk
between
up.
directors, but it's the
Yeah.
same writer, so it's kind of
Right.
weird.
That's where I got to chalk it up to the writing because
Yeah.
like the whole thing like Whistler in the first movie, as far as you can tell, it was off screen, so it means they're never actually dead if it's like a comic book movie or
No
something like
body, no
this.
dead.
Nobody not dead. But it still felt like it was the end of that character. And in this movie, I don't really feel like they like properly justified bringing him Whistler back at any point. Like it always felt weird to me.
Absolutely not, but it gave us the listen shit kicker. You're about one hair away from hillbilly heaven, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I love that line so
I
much.
was happy to have Whistler back. I like Chris Christopherson in this role, and I like him. I like his Norman Reedus, a young Norman Reedus after
Yes.
Boondock Saints.
Yep.
Which, if you ever want me to veto a movie, pick Boondock
Boondock,
Saints.
Boondock Saints.
Oh my gosh, especially the sequel. I mean, the first one though is just a series of fades, and I don't understand why every
That's
fight
fair.
in that movie is a fade. So like fade to the next
I
scene,
think
fade within the scene.
I think I keep forgetting that movie exists, so
Yeah, it's
fair for
best that
me.
you do. Sorry, I know that
It's
movie
likely
has a
I'll never
cult.
rememn it.
Yeah. I know that movie has a strong following
I
for
mean, I
people
made
who
fun of
do like
Darkman.
it.
That movie has a cult.
Not like Boondock Saints. Boondock Saints is its own thing, man. They're still trying to get a third one made.
Oh no.
The second one's one of the worst
I'd
things I've
rather
ever
have more
seen.
Boondocks, thank you.
Yeah. Ugh,
Boondock Saints, not even the best Boondock project.
no. But yeah, so yeah, as a sequel, like in terms of its setup, because it gets weird flashbacks to the original, like it's very
Previously
clumsy.
on Blade.
Yeah, it's very clumsy in the opening of this
Yeah.
movie, just setting up what's going on and bringing back Whistler and all that stuff. But once it like gets to it, it's a lot more like I like it a lot more than the
I
original
think
Blade.
they, of course, I haven't seen Blade 1 in a while, but I think they do Wesley Snipes' Blade a lot worse in this movie compared to. I mean, I can just point to the scene of the two cops shooting at him in the first movie, and it's like, you lost your goddamn mind. Like the
Oh
way
yeah,
he delivers that line, I I keep wanting things like that. They play him very stoic and very like letting the world happen to him,
yeah,
and some of the through lines falter a little bit, like Nissa discovering that she catches him like juicing with the serum that makes it so that he doesn't have to drink blood. And just by her catching him and her going like, I've accepted who I am, and he's like, oh, I feel bad now. But it's like, why do you feel bad? You're literally using something so that way you don't have to drink human blood. That is a positive. So it's just kind of
Right.
weird writing. I can't really defend the writing very much in this movie, but
Yeah,
let me some Del Toro.
yeah, I mean, I think that Goyer gets the comic sensibilities in terms
Yeah.
of like the characterization and the one-liners and stuff like that of like the individuals. Like I think he gets the comic aspect of it very well. I don't think he fully like the transference from the original to the sequel in terms of, like I said, kind of the continuity of um yeah, I think that, like I said, I think the first movie is more fun than the
Hmm.
second one, but I think the second one is still better in every other way.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the line that I draw there.
Villain's a lot better. I like Nomak, even
Yes.
though he's a twist villain that I really don't like this kind of twist villain, where it's like the guy that
Right.
you knew it was going to be the whole time,
Yeah.
and the guy that they are kind of characterizing and kind of setting up and would be a much better villain is just a fight scene in the end.
Yeah. That's where it gets
So
into like the melodrama of it all. Like the last
definitely.
third of this movie is all melodrama. The first like quarter of this movie is just clumsy setup, and then you
Hmm.
get to the Dirty Dozen style like aliens part of the movie, which I think was
Man,
a
they ruined Donnie Yen. They didn't
oh
even give
my
him a
gosh.
line of dialogue.
No, I know, but he did work on the stunts for the movie. He helped with the
Well, yeah,
stunt
he worked
stuff.
on the fight choreography and that kind of thing, which I guess makes sense to why he's there. Doesn't make sense
Yeah.
why he doesn't have a character. Or
Right,
that
right.
he's got a
Yeah.
sword, which I assume is silver, because if it's not silver, it's kind
Yeah.
of a useless
They
sword.
gave
But
him like one fight scene basically, and it's very
they gave him
brief.
half a fight scene. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is very
And then
brief.
he basically dies off screen when he's
Y-
killed by the other guy,
Yeah.
Lighthammer. Yeah.
Oh, Lighthammer.
Yeah, Donnie Yen's character's name is like Snowman or something.
Yep, I think it is Snowman.
I think when on the behind the scenes stuff they reference the Dirty Dozen a lot. I don't
Mhm.
think that that's necessarily the best reference for it, even though I can tell that's what they're
Feels more
going for.
Suicide Squad.
Well, it's just the characters within the vampire group are not that well characterized outside of like
No,
Ron
they're all the
Perlman.
same archetype of Ron
Right,
Perlman.
right. So which one Ron Perlman's well characterized, but then the rest of them are just like lesser versions of him.
Well, yes, because he has a dynamic with Blade, so they've got a history that they go over, and it's an interesting setup with the whole bomb head thing.
Yeah. Which is why I think Aliens is a better like
Oh
comparison
yeah.
because those characters are all kind of the same. They're all like meathead
Well, they're
soldiers.
all like Space Marines, which Space
Right.
Marines all have the same kind of
Yeah,
like
experience and training
brain
and all
makeup,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. But they all adapt to the same situation the same.
Yeah.
So
Not to say that those characters aren't different. Those characters are better
yeah, Bill Paxton
characterized in
is
yeah.
differently characterized than Velasquez.
Yeah, Aliens is a better example of this style of group, but I still
Aliens
think
is one of the best
Aliens
example.
absolutely. But I still think that Aliens is a better comparison for this movie. In the middle section, this feels like a B tier Aliens movie,
It
which I
does.
think works for the
Can we talk
movie's
about the
favor,
slow
though.
shot about that of them like entering the rave? And also,
Oh
can we
yeah,
talk about Chris Christopher's Whistler? Whistler is propped up on a roof of a building across from the rave. How
yeah.
is he going to fire anywhere near
I don't know.
any of the bad guys
Well, then he like disappears for a bit, and I
for no
think it's
reason?
just to build suspicion in the character because they want to divert your attention away from the Norman Reedus character, Scud being the actual
Which
like
is a terrible character.
informant. I
He's
do,
watching Powerpuff Girls twice.
but
Twice.
I think three times actually. But I
Is
do
it three
like,
times? I only
yeah,
remember twice.
he's always has Powerpuff Girls on either way. But I actually like Norman Reedus in this, and I do like the kind of
I like
introduction of
Norman
this kind of
Reedus,
Scud
but
character.
man, can we talk about the terrible twist that's at the end?
Oh, yeah, the
He
twist
just
with the Scud character
dies.
isn't great, for sure.
The
Got
setup isn't
the
great.
yeah, he's got like the tattoo inside of his lip. Stuff
Whereas the
like
other
that.
guy just had it on his hand. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's kind of
no
yeah.
rules when it comes to that.
It is a fun moment though, like when because Blade puts the bomb in the back of Ron Perlman's head earlier in the
Hmm.
movie in a really fun scene. For some reason, Blade's always picking stuff up and spinning it around in this movie. Like
Yep,
you hear a lot of that sound effect.
he's a bit like Johnny Ringo in Tombstone.
Yeah, but it is fun. And like he picks up a sword just in a room by himself, and he just
Yeah, he does.
I'm like, what are you doing? But
He knows he's badass. It's cool.
right, exactly. But then you get he puts the
He's got to
bomb
keep
in
up
like
appearances, even if it's just for him.
he puts the bomb in Ron Perlman's head. And then later in the movie, it's like, it was a dud the whole time. Scud, like, rigged it so it wouldn't actually explode. And then Blade's like, I was on to you the whole time,
It's not a
basically. And then
dud.
and it's not a dud. And he blows him up. I'm like, that's a great moment. He just explodes. I love stuff like that. I just watched The Fury. It's another Brian De Palma movie from the 70s. And the movie ends with this guy exploding, and it cuts to different angles of the guy exploding literally 13 times. And I live for that stuff. So, yeah. But yeah, I think that I really do like the aliens kind of part of this movie though, where they're in the club and then going down into the sewers after that. I think that works pretty well. Those sets are impressive because those are all sets. The sewers
Yep.
and the club are both just giant sets that were made for this movie. The production designer, her name is Carol Spear. She works with Cronenberg a lot. She also worked on Guillermo Del Toro's Mimic and Pacific Rim.
Yep.
Yeah, she does her ability to create what Guillermo was asking for is incredible, and I don't think this movie gets a lot of credit for that. And I think it's just because the sets are so good that
No,
people aren't
production
even
design
thinking about that.
is brilliant in this movie.
Yeah, I also like the little bit of flair that the costumes have over the first movie, which costume designer, her name, I don't know if I wrote her name. Oh yeah, Wendy Partridge, which she worked on like Underworld and Hellboy and Silent Hill and one of the Resident Evils, and you can definitely tell it's that same kind of like early 2000s kind of gothic but
So
edgy
yeah,
like style thing.
yeah, early 2000s gothic vampire movies
Yeah,
are her
but
shtick.
Blade's buckles on his suit are now like a little fancier, you know?
Mhm.
And he also like inside of his cloak is red now. It's not just all black. There's red inside, which I think looks really cool and I just dig it. Yeah. And yeah, but I think the reason that the alien stuff still works, even though it definitely feels just kind of like an aliens riff with all of like the swarming like uber vamps, um, is just because the action is really well done in this movie for the most part. There's some bad
Yeah,
like CGI
aside
bottle
there,
doubles.
yeah, there's some very like plastic Keanu from Matrix Reloaded in this movie, but
Yeah, but they
and
still
it somehow doesn't help when most of it's in the dark.
yeah.
That doesn't help it, but I will say the choreography is pretty good.
Yes, and they still do a good job with the bad CGI doubles because that was just the time. You know, even in Lord of the Rings,
Yep,
there's some bad CGI
there
doubles,
absolutely is.
and yeah, and that was the peak at the time. So, but they still do a good job though with like the transitions for the most part, where you'll get the CGI double transitioning into live action or vice versa.
Hmm.
There are a few shots that are completely standalone where it's CGI, where it doesn't work
Most
that
of the
well.
end fight scene is uses it
Yeah, but
quite a
it
bit.
still does a good job with like landing and stuff and like making sure that you're cutting between the CG double and the real one so that the the image is continuous and it snaps you back into it, I think, when the real person is there, and it's seamless in that transition. And I think the movie does that fairly well.
Hmm.
But yeah, the action choreography is great. Like there's that fight scene where Nissa and the other guy sneak into their warehouse, and
Assad,
yeah,
who they introduce and immediately brush him off. I don't think he has more than like two lines afterwards.
yeah, he's just part of the crew, and then he dies at some point. I don't even remember when he dies. But, yeah, that scene is really great though. The fight action in there. I even like the whole setup to that scene, which feels very Del Toro, with them like
Hmm.
completely silently sneaking in, and you see them in the rafters swinging around, you know, getting over there. Very Del Toro style suits too, you know, with the goggles and everything.
Yep.
Something you'd see in Hellboy for sure.
Yeah, I was about to say, feels like the dude from Hellboy, the German dude who's like
Yeah.
steampunk.
Yes.
Feels very that.
The one voiced by Seth MacFarlane.
Hmm. Wait, is that? Oh
I'm
my,
pretty sure, isn't that?
is it Seth MacFarlane?
Well, now I have to look it up.
It would not surprise me, but what's his name?
Yeah, it is. It's Johan. It's Seth MacFarlane.
No way.
Yep.
From the first movie or the second movie?
It's in the second one.
Oh, I was talking about the German steampunk guy from the
Isn't
first
that
movie.
isn't that Johann in the second one?
I don't think they're the same character, are they? Oh, maybe you're right, but no, I don't think so because in Hellboy 2, it is.
I
Oh my
just
god,
looked up
it
the
is Seth
cast for
MacFarlane.
Hellboy 2, and that's the one where I'm pretty sure
No,
it's Hellboy 2.
the dude from Hellboy 1, the person I'm thinking of, you'd know it when you see it,
Okay.
but
I believe you.
but Carl Cronin. That sounds right.
Yeah, I mean I
Yes, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Look up Hellboy 1, Carl Cronin. It's Ladislav Baron.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of with the. It's very Borderlands esque.
Yes, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
more sense for the comparison.
No, I didn't know Johan was Seth MacFarlane, although it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's shoot, the goldfish from American Dad. That's Bradley Baker. Who's the guy who voices Appa and like basically every animal and
Oh,
every
D.
animated.
Bradley Baker.
D. Bradley Baker. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's him.
A
They sound
terrific
almost
voice actor.
identical.
Oh,
Terrific
yeah.
voice actor.
Oh,
Olmec from
absolutely.
Legends of the Hidden Temples.
And like all of the clones in Star Wars.
Every single one of the clone that isn't the Jango Fett.
Yeah, the ones animated clones at
The
least.
animated clones, yeah.
Yeah.
What were we
Uh,
talking about before?
I don't remember.
It
Oh, you were talking about like the alien section of the movie and the action because there's that whole scene in the first like real big fight scene in the movie.
Uh-huh.
'Cause you get the little intro scene where he's like slow motion jumping off the roof and like shooting the guys,
Oh right, yeah.
which is a cool scene. But then later, I think that you get the more standout scene of the Blade versus the two of them in the warehouse. It's just a cool like that's where it's like really establishes that the action is kind of a different level than the first movie. Because
Right.
yeah, I thought about in the first movie rewatching it, like the whole end fight with him and Steven Dorff. it's,
I
it's
think you
just
mean Deacon Frost.
yeah, Deacon Frost.
Basically every villain name from the late 90s.
They're basically just going like overhead, just like left, right, left, right, left, right, like back
Yeah.
and forth, just ting, 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 ting. It's like not a sword fight. It's just slapping around like your brother in the yard with sticks.
It's a bit like
you know?
half of the lightsaber battles in Star Wars.
Yeah, it's not. It was like, what is this right now? This doesn't make any sense. But in this one, there's more direction in the actual action going on. There is really
And that's got to be
cool
Donnie Yen.
yeah, there's well, and the stunt guy who's worked with the stunt coordinator for the movie was his name is Jeff Ward. He's worked with Wesley Snipes a lot, but he also did the first movie, I think. I don't know for sure. But I mean, yeah, him and their stunt team with probably the help of Donnie Yen too made the action really cool in this movie. It's really fluid. It doesn't cut around nearly as much as the first movie or
Yeah.
a lot of action movies at the time, you know. This was kind of like it was right before Bourne. I don't remember when the first Bourne came out, but
2006 or 7 sounds right to me.
yeah, right,
The
cuz
Bourne Identity.
after Bourne came out,
Oh,
it
never mind.
was
2002. So,
yeah,
same year.
same year. Okay, so this is before the influence then of Bourne because you really see in the third Hellboy, not the third Hellboy, the third Blade,
Yeah.
where like the action is just cut to pieces. It's terrible. Which that one's directed by David Goyer. It was his first
Right.
movie. Never a good idea to like put a producer writer first time directorial thing
Yeah.
on like a big budget superhero movie. We saw that happen again with like Dark Phoenix, the X-Men movie. Because you had one
Who
of the
directed
producers.
that?
I forgot his name right now, but
Here,
it's
I'll
a
look it up.
he's a long time producer.
A longtime producer, first time caller. Simon Kinberg.
Yes, Simon Kinberg directed Dark Phoenix. Mistake. Don't make your first directorial movie a huge blockbuster. I think
He was also
like,
the sole writer and director, which is kind of a mistake for a very big budget.
right. Yeah,
Ugh.
he was a
Like
consistent
Marvel
writer.
nowadays using just
Yeah.
one writer because that gives them supreme executive power and which man that's very swing and a miss when it comes to gigantic movies with
Yeah.
continuity with things like that. You need more voices
Yeah.
than just one person taking. All right, uh,
I
this
mean,
stuff that you worked on, I'm gonna change it a bit.
I can see them letting him do it because of the success of the first two films and his heavy involvement in that success, writing both of them. Because I don't think like
Wait, which ones did he write? First
he
Class and Days of Future Past, or
oh Kinberg. Oh, yeah, I was talking about Goyer again, but
oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay, okay,
Kinberg
okay.
wrote a lot of the X Men movies. Like he wrote a lot of the good ones. So
Which small
he's just been
tangent,
very
but
involved.
the like racial tension that stems from vampires, uber vampires and humans in these movies, I think are done a little bit more believably than X-Men's mutants and humans, because mutants and humans thing, it's more of like an ignorance therefore fear thing, but for vampires and humans, and it's done in like Van Helsing, where it's they have a quota of how many humans they get to, feed on over a given certain amount of
Right.
time. But it feels like it's much more thought out for vampires to have that kind of tension or species tension,
Yeah.
because of the fact that there is a prey and predator style thing, like
Yeah.
a wolf and a deer or something
And
like that.
I always like it in vampire stuff where they kind of do establish like there's a reason why we don't like just take over the world, because if we took over the world then we gotta like turn human into cattle. There's a lot more management. It's easier to have smaller numbers in our populations live in
Not
the
only that, we
shadows.
don't want to make the humans extinct because that is our
Right.
food source.
Have you seen Daybreakers?
I have not.
Or is that the name of it? It's Ethan Hawke vampire movie, early 2000s, or maybe it's late 2000s. Either way, it's a whole movie where the world is taken over by vampires, and Ethan
Yeah,
Hawke is a
Daybreakers
vampire.
2009. It's
Yeah,
got Willem Dafoe.
it does have Willem Dafoe, and I really like
Oh, it's
Daybreakers.
Sam Neill.
It's one of those that's not great, but I like it because it's taking that whole like the vampires have taken over the world. It's their society, but they're running out of food.
Oh, cool. It's literally Matrix with vampires.
Well, except it's not as action heavy.
Uh-huh.
It definitely has action stuff in it, but
More
it's
like politics kind of thing.
yeah,
Or
yeah, and he's so Ethan Hawke is like realizing that he can turn back into a human, which I mean I don't know, but the
that
movie
happens
that
with
makes
this
it
movie with Chris
yeah
Christopherson somehow.
it makes its whole plot is him kind of getting in contact with Willem Dafoe, surprisingly not a vampire in the movie, and turning him back into
Oh,
a
no, no, no.
human.
Even when he's not a vampire, he's a vampire.
Yeah, because
He's
they're
a
running
secret
out of food and
vampire.
all that. So yeah, but yeah, Daybreakers, check that one out if you like kind of this style of vampire stuff. If you're kind of a sucker for it, no pun intended, like
Oh,
me.
nice. That's what I like about this movie. It's got real stakes.
Oh yeah, good one. But I mean, I'm just into
Listen, you can't
vampire
beat me in a
horror.
pun off.
Oh man, no, I'm not gonna try. I don't. That's why I say no pun intended, because I really don't intend it. But
I intend so
mm,
much.
but yeah, I'm just kind of yeah, I just love this stuff, and even like I love all types of vampire stuff. And actually, for my next one, I was going to pick a vampire movie, but
Aha!
I didn't though because you picked a vampire movie. I went in a different direction.
That would have been a mistake. I'll
But
stop for now.
oh, okay, that's good. Leave me be. But yeah, no, the action. There's a few action scenes in this movie that I think are really great. There's the one towards the end too, when you have like the whole room and he rises out of the bloodbath. You know, he
Hmm.
kills Ron Perlman and then the group fills in, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the group fills in, then he kills Ron Perlman. Either way, there's like he's just standing there for a minute and then it kicks in like this, which this movie's full of techno. Like the first one
It
had
is,
techno
yeah.
in it, this one is full of techno.
This is full
um
techno plus hip hop
right, and then
for
there's some
song
orchestral
choice.
stuff. Marco Beltrami did the score. I think an underrated composer. He works with James Mangold a lot, and I like Marco Beltrami, but yeah, most of his like
You're saying
score
names that
stuff.
sound familiar to me, but I don't know.
Marco Beltrami is one of these composers that is not like one of your A-listers, you know, he's not somebody that's going to be the first guy that I think that studios go to, but he's a really solid, you know, like B plus,
Oh, he
like
did
in the
iRobot.
he's yeah, he got nominated for a couple Oscars, 310 to
That's
Yuma and
another
another
guilty
one.
pleasure of mine.
Which one?
iRobot.
iRobot? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That one I can't watch it anymore. That movie makes me nauseous. I don't get car sick or motion sickness, but for some reason
Is
certain
it the
movies,
cinematography?
yeah, it's spinning around. Like that camera's
It does spin
moving.
around. Yeah, especially the end when Will Smith's trying to kill Vicky, the
Oh,
AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely
And
spinning.
same thing with like Ron Howard's The Grinch. Like that camera's on a sway, and it kind of makes
Oh
me
no.
nauseous watching it. I don't get it. Like, but yeah, but yeah, that action sequence and like the music cue that kicks up that action sequence is so good. And that's one of the better Blade lines in the movie too. When he goes, I forget exactly what he says there, but he just stands up and yells something. Dang it, I wish I could remember what it was, but and then it just kind of kicks in this music and techno and stuff. It's
Yep.
great. There's also the fight with just him and um what's the villain's name again?
No Mac.
Nomak. I was gonna say Novak, but
That's
uh
close.
yeah,
Djokovic?
when him and Nomak are fighting in like the on
You can
like
call him
the
Prince Nuada.
rafters,
I would
Prince
know what you're
Nawada,
talking about.
the rafters and stuff in
Hmm.
the one like looks like a church, but it's outside the club kind of technically.
Oh yeah.
Um, that's
That is a
also a very
weird
cool fight
set
scene.
piece, but whatever.
It's a weird set piece, but it's cool. Like it works for me. All of the action scenes in this movie are
By the
really
way,
cool.
I love the lines like over the radio that were like, Nomak's escaping, but the sun's coming up, so you're alone. But Nomak is also susceptible to the sun, so you could absolutely follow anywhere that he goes. No, you're still vampires. You can still, you know, you can still help. Just put on some sunscreen.
Right. Just put on some
Sunscreen?
sunscreen. We're just gonna
Oh,
ignore that fact right now. Like
yes, we
in
are.
the second movie, that's what they're like. They're like, that doesn't matter. Nobody else figured it out.
They even joke about it because Whistler literally says better put on some sunscreen,
Right.
cupcake or something like that.
And I'm like, yeah, they should.
Yeah, that yes. Do that thing that you set up that was possible. Yes, you should.
Yeah. Which I will
Maybe
say,
you should.
I don't really know much about Blade's comic origins at all.
This I could
Guillermo
be
Del
wrong about
Toro.
this,
Okay.
but from what I know, he wasn't the Daywalker until these movies. As in, he was immune to vampires. He wasn't necessarily a vampire himself. He still had the thirst for blood, that kind of thing, but he was still pretty susceptible to UV radiation or UV light, garlic, and silver until these movies, or until at least he was bitten by Michael Morbius, which I had to drop. I had to drop Morbin. I had to name drop that.
Wait, it
But
was
until
Morbius who bit him?
Michael Morbius was the one who bit him. In
Oh,
fact,
that's
I
crazy.
think I think these movies were supposed to be Morbius movies until they decided to make their own franchise for
Well, based
Morbius.
on the
But
Morbius
20 years
movie
later,
itself, that's a good
the
idea
one
to
that
not
was
make money.
re-released twice. Yeah, yeah, and still didn't make money.
Oh my gosh, that movie is not good.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't watch it, but on purpose.
yes, good call.
As much as I like Blade the character, and I cannot wait if they are ever going to do the Mahershala Ali
Yeah, if that ever
2025. If that
happens,
ever happens, I will watch the shit out of that. But
absolutely. But yeah, it
especially
kind
because
of
I just like Mahershala Ali.
Del Toro talked about in one of the behind the scenes things how he read a few Blade comics when he was
Hmm.
younger because Del Toro's like one of these guys who's huge into comics and he's a massive
They
collector
are
and
weird
everything.
comics.
Oh
At
yeah,
least in
but
the 70s when they first came out and into
yeah,
the 80s, they are weird comics.
but he described them as he's like I liked Dracula in those comics. I thought Dracula was well written, but Blade the character felt like this kind of
He was basically just Dracula Elmer Fudd.
but
I'm
well
gonna be honest.
well, he talked about how he was kind of like a jive talking black superhero written by
Definitely black
white
exploitation.
guys
Yeah,
who didn't understand him, and then he said he watched the 1998 movie and he's like somebody got it, they got Blade right, which he up to that point I guess Del Toro thought that they never got Blade right in the comics. So I think that there was kind of a redefining quality to the character of Blade in that original Blade movie that is carried through, which is really cool. Like that, sometimes when a character has potential but in its own medium isn't, you know quite lived up to, but then it can be still like mined correctly in another medium and kind of redefined. That's always cool to me.
hmm
So yeah, but that's the only reason like Del Toro was like still kind of interested in like doing it, because he was like, I didn't like this character back when I read comics that featured him, but now like I liked it, the version that was in the
Yeah, the
movie.
movies definitely made
So
they definitely changed the lore around Blade in that he definitely wasn't like this beforehand.
yeah, because even in like other things that came out with Blade in it, like Marvel's Ultimate Alliance
But
and stuff like that,
that was even
when
after Blade Trinity, I think.
right, but that's what I'm saying though. Blade had been
He
redefined
had
by that
by
point,
the
like
yes, by
completely.
these movies specifically.
Yeah. So it's just kind of it's interesting to see that, and it's cool to see when you get something positive coming out of that. It's good.
It happens more often than not. Especially was it the new 52 changed kind of everything that the
Yeah.
uh comic books were like. Comic books change more often than not by external forces, whether that be new writers or new animators, definitely, but or new illustrators rather, but definitely also based on movies. The popularity of a movie
Yes, like
absolutely changes the line of comic book that character's
absolutely.
in.
And like Guardians of the Galaxy, the lineup
Mm-hmm.
in the movie was
Mm-hmm.
not the like that specific lineup was not one of the ones that was like one of the defining ones in the comic. But they kind of now like all the Guardian stuff that came out right around those movies coming out was all based on that specific
They
team.
made relatable characters that were
So
very popular because of that, and also because
yeah.
yeah, and because they're
So
pretty good movies.
what
So
were good comics that people did like but had obscure characters? They took a handful of those obscure characters, put them together on a team, and then suddenly now that is the definitive team as far as most people are concerned. And the comics followed suit. So it's kind of yeah, it's always interesting to see that kind of
and
thing
also this
happen.
set of movies just straight
Um,
up like allowed for the MCU to happen because they were Marvel
oh
Studios
yeah,
at least were on the verge of bankruptcy when
I
this
mean
was all
this
happening.
really took it seriously. Like superhero movies at the time, like okay, so you had the '89 Batman. Superman had been dead in the water for years at this point. Superman 2 was like
You
early
also have
'80s,
movies
and
that were purely for like marketing purposes, like Batman and Robin and Batman Forever.
yes, yeah, because the Batman after Tim Burton, after went into Joel Schumacher's
Hmm.
Batman, uh, it went off the rails, goofy, campy, weird,
But
and
not the
so
good kind of
this
goofy
was
campy.
like, yeah, which I would say that the Blade movies are a little goofy, campy, but they still take themselves seriously.
They're of the
Those
time
movies did
though.
not.
It's feeding off of the Matrix's pioneering
Yeah.
definitely.
Oh, very much of the time, but still, like for the time that they came out for a comic book adaptation action film, like definitely was more grounded than what was coming out
Somehow.
around it. Somehow, yeah.
Thank
Which
you,
I
Joel
think it,
Schumacher, for making Batman literally the least
yeah,
grounded character.
yeah. So I think Blade weirdly has like a pretty important spot within like the landscape of modern superhero films. And then I think that more importantly then X-Men and then Spider-Man came out and really kind of hammered that in even more
Right.
so, like more specifically. But because those movies took themselves seriously and they kind of lost, like they don't like rid themselves of the camp quality, but they like, you know, they
I'd still say the
had
Spider-Man
actual
trilogy has a decent amount of camp, but that I think that's just Sam
yeah.
Raimi.
Yeah, I think that's Sam Raimi, and that's more of a stylistic camp, but like the stories took
Oh
themselves
yeah,
seriously, and the dramatic arcs of the characters felt important and significant. They had weight to them. Whereas, like, I think Blade, even Blade 2, like, it's a little
yeah. It
silly.
doesn't
Like,
take it when it comes to the story. It
no,
doesn't take itself seriously. When it comes to the dialogue,
no,
it
no,
really doesn't take itself seriously.
no. It takes itself seriously with the
Hmm.
world that it's
Sure.
in. That's kind of where that's where it like actually takes itself seriously, which I think works for these movies. I think it makes them fun, and I think that they are effectively cool, you know, especially when they came out. Now looking back, if you're like kind of roll your eyes at kind of early 2000s stuff, then maybe you're just gonna roll your eyes at this stuff too, but I don't know, I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there are points in this where I'm like, oh, that's awesome. You know? So yeah, I'm into it. I like the whole vibe of this really.
Oh, I see. I see. You went with action for the
I
genre one.
think this it is more of an action
It
movie
definitely
than a
is.
horror
Definitely
movie.
more action than horror. I guess the only other one I would suggest would have been either comic book or But we didn't do comic book for Batman Begins.
No, I that's why I figure it should be a genre category
Hmm.
because that seems to be what makes the most sense. So I think that this is first and foremost an action movie.
Sure.
It has a lot more horror in it than the first Blade. I think that that's Del Toro though, like because he literally has like there's this really cool special feature on the Blu-ray. By the way, if anybody has the Blu-ray or the DVD for this, it came out in the heyday of like Blu-ray and like special features and stuff because VHS tapes couldn't really have special features except for like you'd see like the interviews with George Lucas in front of like the Star Wars special editions and stuff like that. But that was like it. So now with DVDs and allowing for special features, these early 2000s movies, a lot of them, especially like studio movies, are just jam packed with special features, way more than you would think. And so there are hours and hours of special features on this. And one of them that's really interesting on the Blu-ray specifically is this Guillermo Del Toro's Notebook, and it's literally his notebook. They just kind of took it and put it on screen, and then you can
Oh,
flip
that's cool.
pages in it and click on things, and he'll like cut to a video of him talking about that kind of thing for a couple minutes. And his like little sketches and stuff, like the anatomy, he said like as a kid he would like to imagine the anatomy of certain mythical creatures, so he would make like very scientific looking drawings of like their chests spread open with like
I mean,
pins
there
in it
is
and stuff.
literally an like uber vampire style autopsy in this movie. So
Yes,
yeah.
so that's he talks about how he pulled from like that and used it here, and because he really likes to think about the anatomy of these things, so he's like putting all of this anatomical stuff out there, and he talks about all of his different sources, like underwater creatures, very unhuman, and like it's really interesting. Like it made me appreciate even more his contribution to this movie and kind of what he did, because a lot of these things, like the vampire's faces opening up, and he like picked up like a he's like, this is a first edition um volume of the first English language book to talk about like vampires and vampirism.
Yeah.
He like has it just like in his collection. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And he talked about how they have like stingers and what's not, like they're referenced in it. And so he incorporated that into this. Yeah,
Yeah, they
and
not only
so you
have
get
like
the
incisors that obviously for vampire bites, but they have like side fangs for paralytics to be injected.
yeah, and it's just really interesting, and like it's also really cool the way that the movie used animatronic puppets for I wouldn't be surprised if you actually didn't know this, but like the scene where Lighthammer gets bitten.
Yeah. Is it like a
um the it's
it's a
a
dummy?
from the waist up, it's an
Mhm.
animatronic, and the mouth is fully animatronic and everything in those scenes. And so they do a good job. That's where they do a good job blending the CG elements, which are a little dated even on like the mouth stuff where it is good, and like the animatronics really kind of helps sell the reality of it. I think
Well, I mean,
that
is
kind of
that how they
blending of
did
those
like
things.
Predator, that kind of thing?
Predator wasn't CG. Wasn't really that much of a thing back then.
Oh,
So
so what you're telling me is the vampires in this movie, well, the Uber vampires are CG?
oh no, okay, sorry. Yes, the mouth flaps opening for the most part is
Is
CG.
practical
However,
or CG?
there's also they have it's both. They have you can look it up, and I can or put in like an image or something in the
I
video
just
of
assumed they
like
did a
the
bit
behind the
like what
scenes.
what they did for Predator, but I
Yeah,
definitely
it's
couldn't tell
it's
it was
kind of
CG.
like that. Yeah, it's robotics. Like it's robotics for some of it, and then other parts of it are CG, is what it
Hmm.
is. So it just depends on the scene and what the context is needed for it. So it's well done though. Like and it adds to the horror for sure. Like the fact that if you're making a special effect, you should be able to make it in reality
Yeah.
because that really helps sell it. Even if you make the thing just so they can model it off the thing, then like it really sells the reality of the concept that you're going for. In this case, it's like almost a reduction, like it's a facial reduction. So, because the reason that they had to use animatronics and CG is because you can't actually remove from the face with makeup.
Right.
So, yeah, because it's the whole bottom half of the head that's kind of opens up. It's a cool design, but yeah, there's definitely more horror in this movie. Not too much though. I've mentioned, and Hannah's mentioned on the Haunting in Venice video, that she does not do horror. She doesn't even like Casper the Ghost.
Oh,
But
seriously? Dang, I should have picked
you,
Casper the Friendly Ghost.
hey, that
Oh
means you
man,
didn't
Bill
listen to the
Pullman.
Haunting in Venice
It
review.
absolutely means I did not.
But uh, yeah, so she talked about that there, and she didn't really like the first Blade movie. She thought it was pretty bad. But I put on
Well, I
Blade
mean,
2,
it
and she
is
watched
pretty
the,
bad, but I enjoy it.
yeah.
So
Yeah, she didn't really enjoy it though. She watched the whole thing of Blade 2. She liked it a lot better than the first Blade. So, cuz she was thinking she was just going to fall asleep,
right.
but she didn't. So, that kind of also speaks to, if you're one afraid that it's too scary, it's not. It does have horror elements in it. There's some grossness. It's scary, but it's not like,
Well, combine Predator and Alien. Like
right.
combine the Xenomorph and Predator, and that's basically what you got the monsters in this one.
Right, exactly. So yeah, but yeah, it's not too much for somebody who can't handle a lot with somebody like my wife. So I think, and that's part of why I'm also like, this is more of an action movie still, even in those
Thank
moments.
goodness there were no cockroaches, right?
Oh yeah, I found
That's
another way
two.
to bring it up. It's technically three
That's
because I
yep.
said it once.
That's two for me, and like comedy comes in threes. I'll bring it up once more.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's do the scoring, buddy.
Yeah, let's get to the scoring. Why not? All right.
0 to 2, 0
Scoring.
being poor, 1 being good, 2 being great. We have 10 categories that we'll go over, and this is a
We
very
will.
casual scoring system. Neither of us would rank this movie what it ends up being. I think that covers most of that basis.
Yep, that covers it. So the first category, as usual, is writing.
Okay.
So yeah, David S. Goyer and Del Toro helped a lot with like the actual story
Mm-hmm.
of it, but the writing was still. I think David S. Goyer still
Very
gets
poor.
credit on the writing.
Very, very poor.
I think that I don't. Okay, I don't.
I
think
like the
it's the worst
themes.
thing
I
in the
like
world.
nothing else. When it comes
I
to
like.
good or bad writing, I think this is not great.
I don't. Yeah, I would say it's still not great. I would say it's almost good, but I'll
Yeah.
still go with a 0 here, just because I think
Almost
that,
good basically describes the first two Blade movies
yeah,
when it comes to writing.
right, particularly like in how clumsy it is with like the sequel setup
Right.
stuff at the beginning. I will,
Not much
if
continuity.
that wasn't like so annoying to me,
Yeah.
like just how they tie it back into the like, or try to like establish this movie, you didn't have to do any of that. They just tried too much to do too much. It's like you didn't have to try to like establish that, but they did, and it didn't. It was kind of annoying.
And I've said
And then the other
before,
writings,
I've said before, quite a few action movies. It's not inherent, but when you're making an action movie, you will have a disadvantage when it comes to story and writing and dialogue because of the fact that you need to jumble all these action characters with action itself. And
yeah.
action can be done with good writing. Good writing can come from action, but it's very hard to do so.
Yeah, I just watched the movie Roadhouse, which some people might be like, that's like this cheesy, stupid 80s movie, but I really liked Roadhouse, and I would actually point to Roadhouse as like a good example of like the action feeling like it matters, because they build up the
Yep.
villain really well, where you want to see that happen. Like that confrontation is great because you want to see them come to a head.
Or like
In this movie, it's like I don't care that much about what's
or
going
like
on, but it's
T2,
cool when it
the
happens.
action from the chase scenes and that kind of thing build the characterization of the villain
Yes.
as well as the I can't remember if it's the T1000 or if T1000 is Arnold, but it builds the character of Sarah Connor, John Connor, and Arnold's character,
Yeah.
so as well as the villain. So action
Yeah.
for character's sake can be done well.
This is action for the sake of being cool.
Yes, it is.
And it is.
It is cool.
So I will give it that. But yeah, the writing itself is not the strongest. World building. It's interesting because it is a sequel building off of an already established world of the original.
I would give this a 1 because of the fact that I like this. There's not much payoff, but the setups for the villains are good. The world feels lived in, even if it's like very strange that vampires are just teenagers who like to party. But that is a world.
I think I would give this a 2 if not for some of the continuity stuff with the first movie.
Yeah, we
That
do have to
feels a
take
little
into account
odd.
this is a sequel.
Yeah. because I really like the world, and it mostly continues from the first movie.
Hmm.
But there's weird stuff that happens in the first movie that's kind of disregarded here, or like
Yeah, remember
there's
the
the
UN
whole
meetings from the first movie, like the
yeah,
vampire UN meetings? Where are those?
yeah,
Why is there just
yeah.
one
There's
like big bad Nosferatu looking dude? Why is that the king of vampires?
right, like he wasn't like it just kind of feels like a new thing that they just threw in here to have be the plot. I
Yeah.
think it is a more interesting plot than the first
Oh,
one, but
definitely.
like it feels weird in the way that it contradicts some things. Like we said with the sunblock and whatnot. It's like, well, why aren't they using sunblock if that works? You
Why
know,
aren't they
like
curing vampire? Why is Blade not curing vampires? He loves humans. He hates
right.
vampires.
There's this
Turn
weird
vampires
stuff.
into humans.
Yeah. I think that the world that's actually created with like the nightclub scene and like the actual production design and all of that stuff, the actual vampire headquarters, it's all very cool. Like, and I think the world building is really good there. But because I just think it's held back a little bit by being a sequel
Right.
in a way. Because I think sometimes a sequel can be a strength because you don't have to do the setup. But then
Toy
sometimes
Story
a sequel
2,
still
Shrek
feels like it.
2,
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
thing. And that's just animated movies.
yeah. Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man 2,
Yeah,
Dark Knight.
but yeah, yep, exactly. These are all great sequels that the world has built out. Even with lack of continuity in The Dark Knight between the two, I do think that The Dark Knight is still, because it doesn't try to like, you know, it just kind of it whatever the case is with the lack of continuity, we're just not going to say anything about it. We're just going to move on. This is the world as it is, and you buy it for that reason.
Yeah.
So,
It can also focus on
um,
characters instead of setting up the characters. It can focus on fleshing out characters. That's what sequels are good for.
yeah, yes. So, yeah, world building, I would just give a one.
Characters is going to be
All right.
tough for me. Um,
I still think the Blade character is great. I don't think he's quite as dynamic as he is in the first movie,
they kind
but
of play around
I
with his like intentions with the serum and that kind of thing, but
right.
there's no payoff for that. It's just he's questioning whether he should use the serum, but it's just him like looking depressed at the serum injector, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Um, the character
But
of
I
Nissa
yeah.
is very strange because she is the only vampire in existence who doesn't know the plan of Namaskinos, I believe is his name, which has the word
Right,
name in it.
his
So,
yeah.
apparently his daughter is the only one who doesn't know that he was making super soldier vampires. Um,
Yeah.
Kind of weird. Nomak is the best character in this movie, and he's kind of done wrong at the end.
Yeah, by the end of it
By
it's
the
not
end of it,
quite as
it's not
interesting.
quite as Ron Perlman. I love in this movie, but his character's really weird. I like the dynamic
I think
between
I'd be
him and
I
Blade, but
yeah.
um,
I really like Ron Perlman's character, but the rest of like that group, the Blood Pact, they're just not well defined at all outside of visually. I think they're visually well defined, but
yeah.
like they're not well defined individually.
I mean,
And
Donnie Yen has
so
literally no lines. There's no characterization
yeah,
for him to be had other than very cool martial arts swordsman.
right. So that's kind of it. Like I
Yeah.
wish if those characters were better fleshed out, if kind of the um I mean like Scud is I think an interesting kind of little character
Whistler
in
is
there, but
basically Alfred to Batman, but in the worst possible
yeah.
way. And
I
and
think
yeah, Scud is really a weird character.
yeah, I still think I like the characters overall because I think that it's still kind of an interesting and dynamic world that
I
they've
don't think they're
built
good
with these
characters though.
characters in it. But I would give
I
the
think they're
characters a one.
enjoyable.
I would give it a one for characters because I still think Blade is one of the coolest, just like action heroes there is. You
That's
know.
true, but like I said before, I think I like him better in the first movie.
Mm.
Specifically Blade, not the rest of the
So are
characters.
you one
Jeez.
or zero for
I'm
characters then?
I'm a high zero.
A high zero.
Yeah, we don't care about that because it's still a zero, but
I'm
yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of a one. So if you're a high zero and I'm a one, would you want to defer to a one here, or would you want to just do you want to fight for that zero?
Let's put a one.
Okay. Directing. I don't think this is Guillermo del Toro's best movie, as I've already
I
said.
think
I
it's
think
pretty
he does a
middle of the
really good
pack for
job.
him, specifically for
Yeah,
him.
he does a really good job bringing to life this kind of comic book
Hmm.
movie, though. And he gets the style of it really well. And he manages to bring in a lot of his own ideas, and everything that he brings to this really enhances this movie for me.
Yeah.
Um, I still don't think it's one of his best.
I don't.
He's still getting his
I still
footing.
don't think it's I don't think it's great
Yeah,
directing.
I agree.
I think a one is perfectly
Yeah,
acceptable here.
for me it's like a 1.5, but I wouldn't go up to a 2. I'd round down.
Yeah.
Acting.
Also, just thinking contemporaries, X-Men 2,
Right.
Spider-Man 2 of the time
Yeah,
were
for sure.
way better directed
Yeah.
for specifically just comic book
Yep.
movies. So
I agree. All right, acting. The acting's kind of interesting. I think that there's like I like Norman Reedus, I like Chris Christopherson, and I still like Wesley Snipes in this movie, even though like we
mhm.
both kind of acknowledged I think it's a little bit of a step back from the first one, just in terms of
he plays a good stoic
right.
character.
Like he's a little bit less charismatic in this one than he is in the first one,
He
but
is.
he's still charismatic and he's still cool.
Yeah.
And then you get the like yeah, Ron Perlman's great. I think the vampires all do well.
Luke Goss is incredible as Nomak.
Yes, the one kind of exception to this,
Standout.
I think that Nissa is pretty wooden, which
Very.
she's not an English language actor, and which is interesting because I mean Guillermo Del Toro is a Mexican director, and I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
that she is a Spanish speaking actress. Um, but for the most part in her career, but here, whatever the case was, she was pretty flat here.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but
I still think the acting is good, but not
yeah,
great.
yeah. Once again, another one. Okay, visuals. Visuals might give this movie a little boost because I think that there's we acknowledged the CG doesn't fully hold up. It was good for the time, but it doesn't really hold up. But I don't think that the movie is super hindered by that because I think that for the most part,
Wasn't The Matrix Reloaded plastic face and plastic movement, wasn't that hated during the at the time though?
I mean, it wasn't like I said, I
I
don't think
remember
it's
it being
great
hated.
here. I think in the Matrix though, especially in the sequels, you just have like complete scenes and sequences of just like this rubberized rubber Neo as
Yeah.
they call it. You get a little bit of rubber Wesley Snipes in here, but like I said, I think they implement it better where you get the blend between the live action and the special effects where there's only like a handful of like complete actions made by like the
For
actual
me,
CG double.
that's not so bad compared to some of the like vampire de-resings,
Yeah.
and at least in the first sequence
Yeah, the first
to
sequence
me.
sets it up very poorly, I think, in terms of the special effects. I think the movie overall is really decent with that, actually. And the actual visuals of the movie, though, I think are a big step over the first one.
Production design,
Yeah.
makeup is all good.
Production design,
Yeah.
makeup, costuming, all of these things that we kind of talked about. I think that that kind of pushes it up for me to actually get to a 2.
I actually will agree with this.
Yeah. I don't think it's like our strongest 2. Like if this went up to 3,
No.
I don't think it'd get to 3, but I still think it's pretty great. Like I like the way it looks a lot, and that's part of what draws me in. Editing solid. The action editing in particular is really good for what it is. Still not gonna say that it's a 2 though. I think it's a 1.
I don't think it is a 2, yeah.
Yeah.
It's serviceable for a comic book movie.
Yeah, I think it works well. I think that Del Toro gets the comic sensibility within the action. The anime influence in the action is also really cool, and then also just the rest of the scenes. Like it's a well edited movie. It's just it's not like it's not great. Like I'm not gonna like push it over the line though.
I might butcher this name. Leonor Varela is Nissa, and she is Chilean.
Chilean, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I haven't seen any of her Spanish language speaking roles.
Mhm.
So
I don't think I've.
I cannot speak to her as an actor overall, except for this movie. And in this one, she's pretty wooden. And
Oh, she was in The Man in the Iron Mask.
oh, I have seen that.
No, no. Yeah, the 1998 one.
Yeah, with
Or
Leo.
no, the man with the iron fist is the one that I'm thinking of.
Oh,
That's a way different
the
movie.
RZA movie.
Yeah,
That is a way different movie.
it is a way different movie.
Yeah. All right. Sound. I think this really comes down to what you feel about the techno.
Yeah, it's definitely of the time.
It's
It's
super of the time.
Matrix on steroids.
I love the
for some
techno.
reason.
Yeah, I love the techno, but I'm also not going to say it's the best thing in the world.
Well, also doing hip hop to action scenes can be good, but it just feels weird for this.
I like it. I like it. I don't. Once again, I'm not gonna say it's great, but I like the techno. And otherwise, like,
And like always, I completely forgot what the score was.
mm, well,
It didn't stand out to me. But as I have said before, if a score doesn't stand out to you, that means it's doing its job for the most part.
for the most part, yeah. If it's just enhancing the emotion of something, but
Yeah, or if you don't notice it, if you notice it, that almost always means it's bad.
yes, or it's like particularly good.
Yeah,
In this case, the techno gets.
or you know
I
it.
really like the techno because it is what it is, and for the time period, it makes me a little
Mhm.
nostalgic, um, in a weird
Yeah,
way. Even though like techno,
I get that.
yeah, um, but
I don't think I would give it a
I
two
would
though.
not give it a
The sound
two.
effects are pretty.
This,
The sound
yeah,
effects are pretty weird most of the time.
yeah. I still think the sound overall though is really good. They do really cool sound effects with a lot of like the gear and stuff, and just the vampire fantasy elements of it. It all, I think the sound all works. The techno I like personally, but it might not be for everybody. But I'd give it a 1 for sound.
Sure.
Action, I'd give it 2. I would
Yeah.
watch this movie again for the action sequences. You know, I think the action sequences are all really cool and well done. Outside of those CG body doubles every once in a while, it's really fluid. It's really cool. Yeah, 2.
It's very tense. The only thing I would say is the gunplay is absolutely terrible in this movie.
Yeah,
It was in the first movie, but it's also pretty bad in this movie. I
yeah,
mean, we literally have a guy with a minigun who just goes off on a wall,
yeah.
and the vampire is just fine.
That's where it's kind of that aliens almost stylistic, like we're just doing this for to be bombastic for the sake of being bombastic.
Yeah.
There's kind of that element to it, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but if you're looking for like accurate gunplay, this isn't the movie for you.
No.
um all right, impact is interesting as always. We always say that every episode.
It
But
made a lot of money. It wasn't a I wouldn't say it was a critical success.
no, it wasn't.
Audiences loved it.
Yeah, I think people liked it more than critics did. However, it was liked
Yeah.
more critically than the first one was. But
Was it?
it got higher scores there. The first one was not very well loved critically at all. The second one got like mixed reviews. I can look that up if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd like to be correct about this. Doesn't happen that often for me.
So let's just use Rotten Tomatoes. Blade 2,
They're about the same, and yeah,
yeah,
Rotten Tomatoes.
57% of critics liked it. The second Blade,
Mhm.
and the first Blade, 58% liked the first Blade. The average scores for them, though, are lower on the first Blade.
Hmm.
So, here, let me make sure that's.
I think Metacritic is the exact opposite too.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like it depends on where you look. They're reviewed around the same, I think. But,
They're reviewed around the same.
Okay.
I'd say it's a wash when it comes to
yeah,
what critics liked better. They just didn't like these movies that much.
no,
But this movie did save Marvel from bankruptcy.
yeah.
So.
Or the first.
Or
I think the first one
these
did.
sets of movies.
Yeah, I think that has impact. The continuation of this kind of cemented its pop cultural status. I don't. I think the first one has more impact just because it established the character in the modern age, and for the superhero.
Well, it was
movie
Marvel's
sphere.
first try at a franchise, a modern franchise
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. So I do think that the first Blade would get a 2 here pretty easily. Blade 2, I don't know if it's a
Sure.
2 movie. I think it might be a 1 kind of impact movie because it does continue the legacy of this franchise, this version of this character, and the superhero stuff going on at the time. But I think other movies came, like I think Blade opened the door, and other movies
Mhm.
came right after that, right through the door that had a lot more impact, like X-Men, like the Spider-Man movies. So
Mhm.
I would still give Blade. I think for the most part, Blade 2's like one of its biggest contributions as well would be just Guillermo del Toro getting to do Hellboy after this, which then made Guillermo del Toro more of a name. So you could sway me to a 2 because of that, but I don't know.
At that point, it's interesting. It's a bit like Darkman setting up Sam Raimi's, or putting his foot in
Yeah,
the door when it comes to
it's definitely a foot
comic
in the
book
door
esque
movie
movies.
for sure for
Yeah.
Del Toro because yeah,
Mhm.
Mimic wasn't a hit. He had some great movies that came out before this. And if this movie didn't come out, he probably wouldn't
He was a
be.
very independent horror
Yeah.
movie maker.
Who's
So
to say where his name would stand within the ranks of Hollywood directors nowadays if this movie was never made? I don't know. I think it
he'd
does
still
have
probably
impact there.
he'd still probably be making a Shape of Water or Pan's Labyrinth every now and then. But I do think uh,
And the type of
the
talent he
production
gets.
value would be.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that too.
Like his actual influence within the Hollywood spheres. After this movie was a hit, and then he made Hellboy, which Hellboy wasn't a huge hit, but it still made money.
No,
And then enough to get a sequel. Um, and then he kept going with more and more movies.
but Hellboy set him up amongst fans of that genre of movie.
Yeah.
So he definitely cemented what his style of movie making was with Hellboy
Yeah.
and this movie before it.
So, okay. We're kind of waffling here between a 1 and a 2. What do you think?
I'm fine with a 1.
Okay.
I think that I was just throwing out all the facts that we have.
Yeah, for sure.
Because Impact can be our strangest. Well, it is our strangest category.
Yeah, I think even despite all of those things, it doesn't compare to the original Blade's impact.
Mm-hmm.
And for that alone, I think that's worth going down to a 1 because I don't think that the original Blade's like a 3-level impact movie, like we said. Kind of like if it went up to 3, would it go 3? No. So that being the case, I think
it's kind of got the same impact as Darkman.
Yeah,
so
honestly.
Did we give Darkman a 1?
We gave Darkman a 1. Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, that's about fair for what our scoring of impact is.
Yeah.
I guess. So that gives us what,
11
11 out of 10.
20. So that's for
or 11 out of 20.
Yeah,
so
that's for us a good
5
movie.
point,
That's
5.5 out of.
Yeah, for our scoring
Like I said,
system.
that 4 to 6 is a good, not great.
Yeah, we gave a lot of 1s because we do both like this movie, but
Yep.
So this for our show's rating, this means it's a good movie. So not a great movie, a good one. We both really like it. We both really enjoy it.
But... About average for our scoring system.
Yep.
I'd say going into this, I love this movie. I would still probably give it a 4 to 5 out of 10. So that makes sense.
See, but me, I give it like a 6 or 7 out of 10. You know, I enjoy it because I go by feel. So if I were to rate it,
right.
I'd give it a 6 or 7. But I really, it's a fun movie. It's a good time. So definitely check it out if you are a fan of superhero movies and you haven't checked out the Blade movies. Why not? Just go back, check out the Blade movies. I think they're a lot of fun.
Yep, just the 2 of them.
Yeah, don't bother with the third one. It's not good. I actually don't think it's quite as bad as its reputation, but its reputation is like the worst thing ever. And so that was what I was expecting, and I was like, this is just
I think it's because it's a stark decline and a stark change.
I was like, this is just
change.
I was like, this is just regular bad. This isn't
it
like
takes poor writing and it takes poor writing and makes it worse.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna be favorable if you do that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well,
felt like Goyer. Did that movie come out after or before Batman Begins? Because he starred the Dark Knight trilogy, and I'm wondering if he believed his own hype with storytelling.
I think that came out after.
Was it 2004?
Yeah. Oh no, it was before.
It was 2004.
It was before. So, yeah,
it's possible he was working on it with Christopher Nolan.
Yeah,
kind of.
He also
there might have been an overlap. So.
Yeah, and he also worked on Man of Steel.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he's been involved in the comic book stuff for a while, and I think the guy knows his stuff when it comes to comic books. I don't know if he's the best writer in the world. I don't think so, but I think that he does at least understand the medium that he's adapting from well enough to.
Because comic books are written in a very particular way.
Right.
It doesn't always have to be good storytelling.
No, like Guillermo Del Toro even talks about in one of the behind the scenes things, like comics have this very almost awkward kind of language to them that doesn't really translate to reality very well. And I think Goyer does a good job at taking that aspect of comic books and moving it, as well as kind of like taking characters specifically and from the comics and bringing them to the screen. But yeah, I don't know. I think
the Spider-Verse movies do that the best.
Yeah, there are other movies that do it better and other people that do it better. But I understand why he's gotten a lot of shots at making movies like this though, because he's continued to be at least put out solid enough stuff to, give some credibility to the genre within films. I think that's what the
Mhm.
Blade movies do, and I think that, yeah, I get it.
I got so excited for a moment. He worked on Constantine the series.
Oh
I
yeah.
really thought he wrote the movie. I love that movie.
Oh really? I did like Constantine better than I thought I would when I watched it a few years ago.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not, that one's not great.
But he also did Nick Fury, Agent of Shield, which was a TV movie with David Hasselhoff, which was not a good movie.
Oh
So
man, well there were a lot of those Captain America. There were like 3 or 4 of those Captain America
Captain
movies.
America movies from yeah.
Yeah, from like the 80s and 90s that were not good.
Oh, he did Kickboxer 2, The Road Back.
Oh man, absolutely. Well, if that
This podcast has devolved into a billboard of David S. Goyer and his IMDb
yeah,
page.
absolutely. So yeah, that does
And
it.
I am here for it.
Yeah, that kind of wraps up our main discussion here and the scoring for
Yes, it
Blade
does.
2. Um, yeah.
Oh, I need to update the rankings now. 11 out of 20. That puts it 2 above Darkman, 2 out of 20 above Darkman, 2 out of 20 behind Untouchables.
All right. So, like I said, I was considering doing a few different.
What are we watching,
Yeah,
Mikiah?
I had 3 different vampire movies that I was waffling between, and then you picked Blade 2, and I was like, I'm not going to do
Yes,
that
I did.
anymore. And
Pulled the rug right out of you, right underneath you.
yes, I also looked at the dates that were coming up in October, and just
Yes.
what kind of what we were looking at situationally. And I mentioned this one in the Texas Chainsaw review, and I thought it would be interesting, since I did talk about it a lot then, to bring up what I think is, for me, a guilty pleasure, but it is bad. But it's the evolution of the slasher genre. And since there is a Friday the 13th in October this month, we are watching
Oh, clever, clever.
the original Friday the 13th. I think the way it lines up though is that Blade 2 will come out on Thursday the 12th. So the announcement for
I.
Friday the 13th will come out the next day.
Oh,
I'll
nice.
put a separate post for it on on Friday the 13th, because the next episode will be Friday the 13th. So
Nice.
I think this will be fun though, because like I talked about in the Texas Chainsaw one, it kind of like, the tropes were there but not really fleshed out, because that's not what that movie was trying to do. And then I could have gone Halloween, because Halloween is still good but has more of the trope element to it. Not that I think that was Carpenter's goal, but I think that it just kind of furthered that along. I think movies like Friday the 13th really cemented that and ran with it in a very trashy, exploitative kind of way of like, we're going to use everything that like is the most appealing to a certain demographic of people, like the people who like this kind of thing. We're going to just
Yeah.
amplify that and make that the whole thing. It's, I think, what Friday the 13th does. It's nothing more than that. It is surface level as it gets. But I think that it's going to be interesting, having now watched a really good slasher, to go back and watch one that I think is, it's a classic, but and maybe it will offend some people for me to say that it's really bad, but I do think it's really bad.
Yeah.
So, and I was also looking at the calendar. I was like, well, maybe there's another day that has a Friday the 13th. And it's like, nope, the next Friday the 13th is next September. So,
Oh, yeah.
so you can expect next September for me to pick Friday the 13th part
Friday
2.
the 13th, part 2. Oh, no.
Yeah. All right.
What about Friday the 13th, part 6? Jason Lives.
Oh,
On?
we'll get there. That one's the goofiest one of them all. That one, okay, that one he literally has a James Bond opening.
That's the Star Trek 3, The Quest for Spock.
No, that one he literally has a James Bond opening where he walks in front of like the black circle and slashes at the screen and blood drips down. That one is like a parody of the other ones almost. Which to me makes it a little bit less fun.
Originally I was gonna do Scary Movie 3
Mm.
because that one is a guilty pleasure of mine. But then I was gonna do The Thing, which I might still do, but
Okay, I mean, I was considering doing the original The Thing from Another World in January, because it's very winter set. But you can do whatever you want, obviously. We'll just do it that way.
what's the one with the terrible? What am I thinking of? Oh yeah, so next week is going to be Friday the 13th. Okay,
Yes.
bye.
Yeah, that'll do it for this week's conversation on Blade 2. Be sure to join us next week for the Friday the 13th episode. And yeah, that's it for us. We'll see you at the movies. You can find us also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And you can find us on social medias, the Instagram and Letterboxd specifically at Gamer Podcast, GAMR. All right. Have a great day.